Welcome, everybody, to Epic Voyages Radio, live here on Inception Radio Network. I'm your host for this evening, Laurel, Blyth, Tague, and I have two very, very interesting guests, prolific authors tonight, and we'll be getting down to business here in a few minutes. Let me remind you that we will be rebroadcasting this show on Friday night every week at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on Dark Matter Radio. And the archived interview from our show tonight will be available sometime after Sunday next weekend, right here at Inception Radio Network. Please check out our website, epicvoyagers.com, and our YouTube channel, where we have several hundred hours of video and audio, and also our Facebook page. And let me just give you a little bit of a teaser of what we're doing here tonight. Tonight's guests are Rob and Trish MacGregor. As I said, prolific authors, and I really do mean prolific, with a recent focus on synchronicity, alien abductions, and contacts from the other side, and possibly other dimensions. So before we get into that, though, if I may, I would like to take a few minutes to make a comment on the loss of someone very near and dear to the Inception Radio Network staff, the hosts, the fans, the listeners, as well as thousands of others. We had some very terribly sad news today. Jerry Pippin lost his battle with cancer this morning at around 4:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. In recent years, Jerry's health and his reaction to medical treatment has really created serious challenges for him in terms of maintaining both live broadcasts and interviews on a weekly basis. But despite all those challenges, his adoring and committed fans flock to his weekly broadcasts, if only to hear the latest updates about his treatment and his health and status. Jerry started out in radio broadcasting as a teenager in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And after college and serving in the Army, he fell in love with comedy and began a long stand-up career in the 60s and 70s and 80s. He began broadcasting online radio in 1999 and added to the Jerry Pippin Show UFO and paranormal topics starting in 2000. Jerry was a straight shooter. He was a gentleman. He was a voracious truth seeker and a dedicated, lion-hearted animal lover. I am only one of thousands tonight who send heartfelt condolences to Jerry's family and close friends. And I want to say, Jerry, you leave a sizable and a unique tear in the garment of our collective reality. And I want to close this little memorial to him with two quotes, two of my favorite quotes from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. You can't act death. It's just a man failing to reappear, that's all. Now you see him, now you don't. That's the only thing that's real. Here 1 minute and gone the next, and never coming back. An exit, unobtrusive and unannounced, a disappearance, gathering weight as it goes on until finally it is heavy with death. Dying is not romantic, and death is not a game which will soon be over. Death is not anything. Death is not. It's the absence of presence, nothing more. The endless time of never coming back. A gap you can't see, and when the wind blows through it, it makes no sound. Rest in peace, Jerry Pippin. You will be sorely missed. Okay, shifting gears. Let me introduce our guest and bring them online live with us. As I said, we're going to be talking about the MacGregors, one of the MacGregors' books. This, I think, was published in 2013. They are husband and wife authors and adventurers, in my opinion, in the real sense. The title of the book we're going to talk about tonight is Synchronicity and the Other Side, Your Guide to Meaningful Connections with the Afterlife. Now, how do I adequately summarize MacGregor's credentials and accomplishments without leaving only 30 minutes or so to discuss the topic tonight? So, guys, forgive me in advance for skipping on the details a little bit, but I'm just going to hit the highlights for you. Rob is the author of 19 novels, 14 nonfiction books, and he has teamed with George Lucas and Peter Benchley. He writes both adult and young adult mysteries, adventure, and science fiction fantasy. Trish is the author of 35 novels, mysteries, suspense, thrillers, and science fiction. Both are winners of the coveted Edgar Allan Poe Award for mystery writing. Together, they have written several self-help books on dreams, synchronicity, our topic tonight, yoga, psychic development, astrology, tarot, dreams, aliens, abductions, and the Bermuda Triangle. I'm looking forward, Rob, hopefully to talk to you later about this electronic fog that we're going to bring up in just a little bit or briefly tonight. But their website is Synchro Secrets, SYCHROSECRETS, synchrosecrets.com. What is synchronicity? One definition is meaningful coincidence. Is there really such a thing as coincidence? Rob and Trish, join on in with us. You're in sunny Florida tonight, right?
Okay, yes.
We are.
Welcome to Epic Voyages.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess, synchronicity is when...
I'd like to say is that I suspect... Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
When synchronicity is when similar inner and outer events come together in a way that doesn't involve cause and effect. And the resulting coincidence is meaningful to the person who experiences it. So basically, sometimes that's not clear to people, but an example is I think of somebody that I hadn't seen since college, and a couple hours later, I get a Facebook request from that person. Well, that's a synchronicity. You could also think of it as telepathy, possibly, which it could be, but it's also a synchronicity. It's inner and outer events. The inner event was thinking about this person. The outer event was the person contacting you through Facebook, and it didn't involve any cause and effect because you didn't write the person a letter or an email.
Well, that's pretty detailed. Trish, what do you have to say?
One of the things I was just going to say about your friend who passed away, that it's very likely you will have some sort of synchronicity involving him. Like maybe there'll be a cluster of certain foods that he liked or books, and you'll immediately associate it with him. And it won't just happen once. It'll happen a couple of times, maybe half a dozen times.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's so interesting about that thought, Trish, and we're having a little bit of trouble with your audio. I don't know if our producer, Joe, wants to get you off to the side and see if he can fix that. But what's very interesting about what you just said, Jerry Pippin literally has tens of thousands of very devoted fans around the world. And if he wanted to make contact through the kinds of things you're talking about, that's all most of us are going to be doing for the next couple of days is paying attention to little nudges from Jerry from the other side.
Oh, here, look what topic you're talking about tonight.
Yeah, right, exactly.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the synchronicity right there.
Exactly. Now, you had a quote in this book, and I wanted to mention that this is not their only book about synchronicity. I think you've actually written a total of 4 books so far on it. Is that right? If we count Aliens in the Backyard.
I think that's right.
Yeah, Aliens in the Backyard, you can count that because that deals with the phenomena of synchronicity related to alien encounters.
Right. And actually, folks, I fully intended to interview them tonight on both this Synchronicity book and Aliens in the Backyard. But when I got into making my notes, there's just so much meat here. I don't think that we have any way at all of getting to the other topic. So we're going to focus solely on this one book tonight. You put a lot of work into that book, and boy, it is an excellent book. Matter of fact, I know you have links on your website, synchrosecrets.com, but I guess people could get that book on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble.
Yes, they can.
Trish?
The other book, too, that we have, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The other book that we have is The Synchronicity Highway, which
Mm-hmm.
is exploring coincidence, the paranormal, and alien contact. So.
Well, now that I've read this one, I think I'm going to have to get the other two with synchronicity in the title. And I already got the aliens in the backyard and read it, so I should be fully prepared for any discussion.
Did you have nightmares?
No. This is not woo-woo stuff for me. This is my typical way of thinking about the world.
Okay.
That's good.
I want to read this quote that I love so much that I may have to put it on a piece of paper and hang it on the wall here in the room. And I think you said that it came from some yoga master back in the day. Rather than physical beings seeking a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings experiencing a physical existence. Or another way of putting it, man has no soul, but the soul has man. Now, if that's not a synchronistic quote in light of what we were saying about Jerry Pippin, I don't know what is.
Definitely.
That is just a great quote.
And now I can't recall who said it.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard it a number of times, and I don't really attribute to that quote to any one person. It's an interesting one, though, and it turns things around because people think that we are human beings on a spiritual search, and not that we are spirits in essence experiencing a physical existence. So that kind of turns things around, makes you think about it a little bit and realize that, yeah, we are spiritual beings.
Right. It is a real paradigm shifter. And in the context, you had just been talking about yoga and meditation, and this was something from some sort of yoga that you had experienced years ago. So I'll do a search on that, and if I do find the person who said that, I'll send it to you offline.
Okay, great.
So, is there such a thing as coincidence? What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't hear what Trish was saying.
Yeah, what did you say, Trish?
Well, I basically said I think that most coincidence is synchronicity, but it has to meet those two criteria, which is what Carl Jung had set up, which is no cause and effect, and it has to be meaningful to the person it happens to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing is with synchronicity, with meaningful coincidence, is there are coincidences, and basically it's when people don't believe in synchronicity, if they don't really think about these experiences as being meaningful, then it's just some random event that just happened to come together. Yeah. But they don't think of it as meaningful. So that would be a coincidence. And a lot of times people don't even realize they're having coincidences. I've talked to many people who have said they've never experienced synchronicity or even a coincidence. And what? Well, I seem to have them. The thing is with us and how we got into this, the more we wrote about it and studied it and researched, and we had more and more, and we still have more and more of these experiences, partially because we're aware of it, but partially because we're thinking about it as well. And sometimes when we talk to somebody, they'll get back to us, one of these persons who never has these experiences, and or somebody who just wrote our book and emailed us or something, and then suddenly they're having all these synchronicities that they never had before. So it's something that it gives the mindset that takes place. It's something that happens where were these people having them before and they didn't notice, or are they suddenly happening now for the first time? It's a good question.
I mean, 32 years ago on our first date, I said to Rob, "Do you know what synchronicity is?" That was
You're
my
kidding.
Criteria.
You're kidding.
That's how it started. Yeah, I remember that. She asked me if I knew what synchronicity was, and I said, "Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know too much about it." And then when we started working together, we both found out very quickly that we didn't like our jobs and we wanted to get out of our jobs and we wanted to be freelance writers. Trish was teaching at Florida International University and I was a newspaper reporter. And Trish had already written 6 novels that were unpublished, and she just finished her 6th one, and she gave it to me. I met her through an interview. I was working for this newspaper, and it was a story about the Marielitos, the immigrants from Cuba that were coming in the early 80s, and what was happening with them. This was a couple years after this boat lift where 100,000 Cubans came into South Florida, and were they staying in the Cuban communities in Little Havana, or were they blending in with the greater population? And so Trish was teaching English as a second language to Cuban refugees, and so I interviewed her, and so that's how we met.
I remember you're from Venezuela originally, right?
Right.
Trish?
Right. Yes, I am.
What a wonderful asset to be totally bilingual. I'm so jealous.
It's really been an asset for me.
I bet.
Especially living in South Florida. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'm from Texas, and it would have been a wonderful asset when I was living down there too.
Right.
I mean, these days in the U.S., it's an asset no matter where you live, pretty much, if you ask me. So,
yeah.
Plus, I think it's such a great skill to have more than to be fluent in more than one language, because it gives you a complete insight to a different culture, which is really broadening. I think it helps people become, I'm not even going to say tolerant. You're more insightful, and there's less to find fault with, I think.
Yeah,
right.
But it's
and also
difficult.
It's a good way. Go ahead, Rob.
It's difficult for Americans because English is a universal language, and you go to Europe and try to speak German or French, and people answer you in English, because
right.
it's their second language, and they probably speak English better than you speak their language. So,
right.
For most people, that is, and so it's more difficult if you grow up in Scandinavia. You speak 4 or 5 languages because
right.
there's only a couple million people that speak their language in the world.
Right. Yeah, I had studied in Austria for a little while, and I was fluent in German, and this was a long time ago. And my experience is that people in the other country are dying to practice English. They just don't want to speak their language.
Right, yeah.
So you have to practice it with the other poor Americans who are over there with you trying to learn it. I wanted to point out that I did a search this weekend when I started making my notes for this discussion, and all I put in Google were the 2 words blog and synchronicity. And you might not be surprised, Trish and Rob, but I was absolutely surprised. I came back with almost 1.5 million hits on just
I did the same search.
That's amazing to me.
Well, I think that in the years since Jung first introduced the concept, that synchronicity has gathered momentum. Especially the farther we get to the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And I think it's reached a tipping point.
I had put for later on in the discussion some points right directly from your book, but I'm eager to give people who aren't quite so familiar with this term synchronicity or examples of it in your own life. And believe me, every one of you out there listening has had something synchronous happen to you probably today, if not in the last couple of days. Give us just a couple of really good, obvious examples from your book.
I'll give you a recent one that's not in the book.
Okay.
And this happened 2 years ago. We had 3 cats, and one of them was 17 years old. Her name was Tiger Lily. And the day I had to go to the vet and put her down because she could no longer eat. And I was sitting in the waiting room sobbing, and this woman comes up to me who works at the vet's office, and she said, "Now listen, honey, your cat's going to come back. Talk to me about the reincarnation of my cat and how it was going to return." So I felt better when I actually took her in to the vet room. And first the vet's son, who's a vet tech, comes in, and he is going to give her a shot to kind of relax her. And he says to me, "Your cat's name is Tiger Lily." And I said, "Yeah, from the movie." And he said, "You're not going to believe this." He says, 2 days ago, one of our employees brought in a cat that had been attacked by a hawk.
Oh.
And we had to amputate one of its rear legs. And it's fine now, he says, but we named her Tiger Lily.
I'll be darned.
I was just blown away. Here a cat had been rescued that they named Tiger Lily. And I was putting down my cat with the name.
Oh, those instances where you have to take your sweet pet in and put them down, I've seen far too many of those, and we're not going to go there tonight, Trish. But I do want to ask.
But I know. But what I'm saying is, I was comforted.
Yeah, right.
No, somebody had already adopted it. I would have.
Yeah, I thought that's where you were going to wind up with that. What were you going to say, Rob?
No,
I have another example that actually involves animals, and this is one that does come from our book, Synchronicity and the Other Side. Our daughter was going to college in Sarasota, Florida, which is across the state from us on the Gulf of Mexico side, the west coast and we would occasionally go and visit her there, driving across the state through the Everglades. And one day we were driving back, and it was right at dusk, and there were all these swallows that were swooping down, and soaring by. And we had seen these swallows before coming back from Sarasota, but suddenly, bam, one hits the windshield. We go another half mile, and another one hits it, another one. Suddenly these swallows are hitting the car, and we thought, boy, what does this mean? And
no, there were only two that hit.
It was just two that hit? Okay. Right. And that's right. Yeah, there was just two of them that hit, but they were all over the place, and they had never hit us before. And this place we were passing by was interesting because we're going to come by there in, what was it, a week or so later, Trish, that we went back to that same area?
Okay, it was 11 days.
11 days,
That was part of the synchro.
Okay, I'll let you...
Here's the deal.
Okay. I'll let you... Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Well,
there were two swallows that hit the windshield.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so...
Now, don't fight, you two. Trish, you want to step in and take it?
This is what happens.
Yeah.
You step in, Trish, and help him out with this story.
Well, let me just tell the basics, and then you can tell some of the details about the synchronicity. What happened is near that spot where we were passing by was a place that 11 days later we met Megan at where she was going to jump out of an airplane. Oh. And so we arrived there, brought Megan, and waited around, and she went up in the plane, and we were on the ground watching everybody jump out. And she was the last one to jump out with a partner, and we're watching, and we're standing right next to one of the instructors, and he looks up and says, "That chute didn't open." And so our daughter's coming down with no parachute. And,
oh my God!
And then he says, "Wait, there's a backup." And then the backup opened up, and because the chute had gotten tangled, and they released the main one, and the backup opened, and they came down and were okay. But we saw this thing with the swallows as like a warning. And go ahead, Trish, with it.
But we didn't know what it was about at the time. So 11 days after we moved her back to college, we meet her in this place for her. Now, it's her second skydive for her 20th birthday. Her appointment was for 12:30, but they didn't get airborne until 2 p.m. She was jumping tandem with an instructor. Now, you notice the emerging pattern here. Second dive, 20th birthday, 2 swallows, a tandem jump at 2 p.m.
And see, I want to interrupt you for just a second. That's very important to those of you who are wondering what synchronicity. That's what you call a cluster of numbers when you see a 2 and a 2 and a 2 and a 2. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so it was the chute, the other 2, that opened, and they went safely. But now, if we had known what to look for, which we didn't when these swallows first hit the windshield, I probably would have said, "You're not taking that skydive."
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't know what it was related to until it was actually happening.
Right. To me,
And what's also interesting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say another facet of the synchronicity lies in the type of birds. Okay, these birds are known as aerialists because of the way they do these acrobatic twists and turns as they swoop across roads catching insects. Now, here's the other thing. The incubation period for swallow eggs is from 11 days. So you got more twos. 11 days after the swallows flew into our windshield. Okay? And then Megan went, plus swallow is also a verb. It's as if the birds drew our attention to something we were supposed to swallow, to accept, or to understand.
You see, I see why I wanted Trish to explain all the clusters. She worked it all out.
It's very much like an onion. That if you finally get it, that if I just pay a little more attention, I will see a lot of things that I'm just missing. And you start digging more deeply. Look at all that you came out with that. It wasn't just the twos. It was the verb swallow. It was the 11, the incubation.
The aerialists.
And it turns into not just a message, but it's a very rich communication from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe from the birds.
I maybe from somewhere else.
Well, sure, somewhere else too. But I mean, animals are communicators. I mean, that animals, I think, really do figure to a lot of synchronicities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a time in my life, probably about 20 years ago, when I realized that things that I really need to pay attention to will come to me clothed as something about an animal or looking like an animal or sounding like an animal. And I've just been very close to that part of nature for many, many years. And so I got into the habit. I'm not going to say I will notice things that happen with respect to cars or weather necessarily, but if it's an animal, I'm looking at it and I'm paying very close attention. And that's really the bottom line to this, isn't it? You need to pay close attention.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's true. I mean, if you don't, it's just, stuff that happens.
One of the examples that was really probably a lot simpler that you mentioned in your book that I thought made it really crystal clear was someone who had just lost a parent or had lost a parent in the past who was a wonderful seamstress, and all of a sudden they started finding straight pins. Everywhere they'd go, they'd find straight pins. And there's no reason for straight pins to be everywhere, but all of a sudden, everywhere they look, there's straight pins.
Me, in college, I was living with a woman whose grandmother had a house on the Hudson, and she was a seamstress. And the day, I think it was the day she died, and then for, I don't know, weeks or months afterwards, we started finding straight pins around the house to the point where, you had to be careful about where you sat. I mean, they'd be stuck in cushions, just weird stuff. And either this woman or I were sewed. Mm-hmm. And 10 years, we were in St. Augustine. It was a woman, her mother, and myself going through Castillo del Marcos, the old fort there. Now, that place has nothing in it. It's all bare concrete floors, bare concrete walls. And there's a straight pin. And I said to the mom, I said, "What is this doing here?" And I picked it up. She goes, "Oh, that's just my mother talking to us." 10 years later.
One of the startling examples that you gave is that it was pinned in the page of a Bible, like it was underlining something in the Bible.
It was not for the woman and I, but for her mother, who used to read the Bible every night before she went to bed. And she started finding these passages underlined. Was her mother trying to communicate certain wisdom to her?
Right. Now that's hard to ignore to me.
Yeah,
it's shocking.
Yeah, objects are something that appear in these type of synchronicities that relate to the people who have passed on. A friend of ours, a blog friend of ours in Cornwall, England, lost his daughter, and what he repeatedly finds and has found right on her grave and in the house, and are white feathers, and they don't know how they appear, where they come from, but whenever they find a white feather, they think their daughter is thinking about them or in contact with them. And so the sighting of a white feather is very comforting for them.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you to say something about, because the white feathers that you described in the book, that was pretty stunning to me. And it reminded me of a time, about 10 years ago, no, maybe 20 years ago, when I was still living in Texas. I used to look down and I would find cardinal feather. Now, to me, a cardinal feather is one of the most rare feathers that you can find laying around out in the grass. They just don't seem to lose their feathers. And one time I found 3 of them laying there together. And I kept thinking, somebody, like I said, animals again, somebody's trying to tell me something. And I'm such an idiot. I have saved every one of those little feathers that I ever picked up on the ground, and I've got them somewhere here at the house.
Oh.
Did you ever figure out what they related to?
Trish, what I chose to think about that is that it was the universe's way of telling me that they had my back and that I was being looked over and protected, and I should
that's great.
I should feel comfortable, because I spent many years agonizing about a lot of things that I couldn't do anything about, and I hadn't let go of that yet. But I just felt like it was a pat on the back from someone who loved me and was watching out for me.
Yeah, that's great.
Sometimes it's just that simple,
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it is. You're right.
There's another one that I read about recently. It's heard about, but it's not in our book. It's a woman had her mother living with her at the end of her life, and she had broken her hip, so she couldn't live on her own. So she was in a wheelchair, and mostly spent her time watching television and also working with wool, yarn, and making sweaters and mittens and gloves and such things. Spent all her time doing that. And when she died, after the funeral and they went to the gravesite, there was a ball of yarn at the gravesite. And so they asked around who put this there. None of the family members, nobody around claimed to have put that ball of yarn there. And after that, the daughter would repeatedly find bits of yarn on her shoulder. Her husband would come up and say, look at this. And it happened for a number of weeks, and then it stopped happening until the 1-year anniversary of her mother's death. She was thinking about her mother and feeling very sad and starting to cry when she felt like a hand on her shoulder, and she thought it was her husband. She turned around and looked, and there was nobody there. And then she called out to her husband, who came up to her and reached up and pulled a piece of yarn off of her shoulder.
That is just amazing.
That's a dramatic one, yeah.
I want to take a second here to tell everybody, the chat room is going absolutely bananas, and I know people don't always tune in right at the beginning of the show. I want to make sure everyone knows that they're listening to Rob and Trish MacGregor, and we're talking about their books, especially their books about synchronicity, and especially the one called Synchronicity: Contact from the Other Side, and guys, I don't usually, in my show, I don't usually take phone calls until the second hour, but I've got people in the chat room who can't wait. And so I'm going to give out the dial-in number here, 888-919-2355. Dial in if you want to ask a question of Rob and Trish. And remember, you can always post a question here in the chat room or in Skype to Inception Radio Network, and we'll take those questions too. Now, you made me think of the geese. Since you were talking about a cemetery, tell the story from your book about the 2 Canadian geese.
Was it the Canadian geese or the loons?
No, that was another good story. This is at a tombstone for a couple who just never went anywhere without each other. They adored each other.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Okay.
Do you remember it, Trish?
Trish, she's looking for it. Tell the other story about the loon was a wonderful too. That was very touching about the woman whose husband died, and he loved loons and loved looking at loons in the lake. Tell that story, Rob, while she's looking for the other one.
Yeah, the woman had lost her husband, and they had a lake house where they would go to, and they always liked the call of the loons and the loons that would come around. And after his death, when she went up there, there was one loon that would hang around near their cabin, and it was almost like it was there for them and
there for her.
There for her, right? And
but she would go out in the boat, and it would be out in the water with her, right?
Yeah, this was after he passed.
Yeah, and she really identified that loon with him, like there was some connection between that
and
creature.
They even began. The people she would stay with after Tom died started calling. I mean, this happened repeatedly every summer. She would go up to visit these people, and this loon, she felt it was the same loon, was always in the water with her when she was swimming. And so even her friends started calling the loon Tom, which was her husband's name.
And digging a little bit deeper, loons mate for life, and this was a solitary loon, so maybe that was Tom there with her because he was her mate for life. Yeah. Did you find the one about the geese?
I didn't. And that upsets me because it was really such a great story.
When we take our break, I will do a search on my Kindle, and I will find it. And I want you to tell that story because you'll do it better than I can go over it.
I have another one to tell. This one doesn't involve animals. This was, I had a couple friends visiting that I had met overseas. And
that's a good one.
Yeah. And I was taking them to the airport in Miami after they had stayed with us for a few days. And we got in this very intense discussion on the drive about life after death, psychic manifestations, and a variety of things. And it was just a very intense, and we weren't arguing. It was just getting, we're deeper and deeper into the subject as we were going along. And then this car passed us, and it was in front of us, and the license plate said Zen 665. And the guy said, look at that car. Wouldn't it be amazing if we saw Zen 666? And not 5 minutes later, another car came by with that very license plate, Zen 666. And it just blew our minds. And not only that, but months later, I again, 75 miles from where we were, I again saw that same license plate on a different car, Zen 666.
That's not something you would even expect to see on a license plate, really.
No.
That combination. And it was just so startling. And it was something that I had, that one had really struck me as being so unusual, that because he almost had predicted that we were going to see that, and then it appeared, like a astonishing magic trick.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask you a question. Reading your book, I can see a real close, maybe an overlap between what I would call intuitive sensitivity and tuning in to synchronicity, or being able to notice it. I'm having a hard time figuring out how to describe that. But what would you have to say about how those two things overlap? Obviously, if you're not going to be alert, and you're not going to try and draw meaning from things that maybe a cold hard facts person would say, oh, that's a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything. But say something about intuitive ability and synchronicity.
Well, I think they're definitely connected.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead,
first of all, let me just say one thing, Trish. Carl Jung had a great quote that synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see. I find that to be, meaningful, and it's. So synchronicity is subjective. It's dependent really on the perspective of the observer, because if people don't recognize coincidence as meaningful, it's not synchronicity, it's just a random coincidence. But as you're saying, the link between the intuitive, we look at synchronicity as being like an umbrella factor, that it's that all the telepathy, all the various aspects of what people consider paranormal, precognition, even
they all fit under that.
Yeah, they all fit under synchronicity, because they all could be synchronistic, or it could be a precognitive event, it could be telepathic, depending on the event. So it's all related, and it's hard to categorize some of these experiences.
Here's a real good example, I think, of intuition, the connection between intuition and synchronicity.
Okay.
We have a friend, Carol Boland, who's an author. She's done 2 books on children's past lives, and this is what her work is. She has an active practice. But
is that Carol Boland in North Carolina?
No, it's Carol. She used to live in North Carolina. She
Okay.
lives in Pennsylvania.
Oh, right. I've read her. Yeah, she is very good.
She's fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And when she was first starting out, I think they had just moved from North Carolina to Pennsylvania, and Steve had lost his job, her husband, and Carol was trying to write, collect her information for her first book, and she was, they're running out of money, and they were having one problem after another. Had 2 young kids, so one day she took a walk, and she had a conversation with the universe. She said, "How can I get my book published? How can I get this book published? We need the money. Plus, I want to get this information out there." She comes back to the house, sits down on the porch. Steve throws open the door, and he said, "You're not going to believe who just called." And she said, "Who?" He says, "The Oprah Winfrey Show." That was her answer.
And she appeared on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, with her 2 kids who had these experiences, which were the springboard for her book.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's an amazing synchronicity. Plus, it's intuitive, because it shows that she knew enough to say, "Okay, universe, what's next? What am I supposed to do?"
Yeah, and having told that story, I think intuition works sort of in the same way that you're describing. Everybody, I believe, has the ability to have some intuitive sensitivity, and it's when you start allowing it into your life and you listen to it and you're open to it, that's when it's almost like practice makes perfect. If you don't want to pay attention and you don't want to hear it, you're not going to hear it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Folks in the chat room, you asked to be able to call in and ask questions. The phone number is 888-919-2355 to talk to Rob and Trish MacGregor. And we won't be taking a break here for another maybe 10 minutes or so. You could also come in the chat room and ask a question. Let me tell you a little story of a very important synchronicity that happened to me, and I'm only sharing this so that listeners, this is a good reason. If you ever needed a reason to act on a hunch, here's a good reason. I live out in the country here in the Appalachian foothills, and we own quite a bit of land, ravines, and hardwoods. And there's a lot of hunting out here when hunting season starts. And I was walking one of our dogs along the creek several years ago. And he had on his little harness, and we were walking along the creek, and he was just tickling me to death with his antics. And so I got down on the ground on my knees, and I was hugging him and patting him, and he'd roll over on his back. And I'll be darned, some idiot on the other side of the creek shot a rifle bullet right over our heads. And if I had not been down on the ground playing with my dog, I would have
Wow.
been on the ground with him wondering what happened to you.
Jeez.
To me, that's really synchronistic.
Yeah,
Something
that is.
happened that had no reason to happen,
Right.
and then after it happened, I realized what the reason was.
Yep. That's a powerful one. The dog saved your life.
Well, yeah. Who knows that whatever it was didn't save both of us, because
Yeah.
Right.
Good
you
point.
just never know. You never know. If people ever had that sensation that have you ever, this happens to me and my husband a lot. We'll be driving along the thruway or something up here in New York State, and it's like if we hadn't stopped to get a cup of coffee or a donut or something, we would have been right in the middle of a big wreck that was just up the road.
Yeah.
Yep. That's why I think it's really important to follow impulses, or like you said, a hunch. But sometimes, you have an impulse to drive a different direction to work or to take a different route instead of the turnpike, you take back roads. And go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I had a life and death experience that happened to me when I just was out of college. I was in my first job as a journalist. I was working as a reporter in Bismarck, North Dakota, a very chilly place, and it was winter, and I was dry. I grew up in Minneapolis, and I was taking off for the weekend, driving the 400 or 500 miles from Bismarck to Minneapolis in a snowstorm. And I was driving this old Volkswagen bus, and the storm was so bad I could not see more than a couple feet in front of me, and it was dark, and suddenly the engine just stopped. And I kind of pulled over to the side of the road as best I could, and I was prepared. I had 2 sleeping bags, stocking caps, a lot of clothes. I'd lived up there all my life, and so what I did is I crawled into those sleeping bags in the back of that VW bus, and I was going to spend the night there, and I knew I'd be, even though it was cold, I'd be okay, and I'd somehow get out of there the next morning. But suddenly there was a rap on the window of the car, and I sat up, and there was a guy said, "Do you need help?" And he had his car there, and he had pulled over, and so I jumped in his car, and we drove up to the next intersection where there was a rest area and a restaurant, and we just stayed there all night long. Well, the next morning, when I went back out there, he drove me back out, and a semi had smashed into me, and just my car was like half the size, like an accordion. And I talked to the state trooper, and he said, "Yeah, we were walking in the snow looking for a body."
I have chills up and down both arms and legs. Oh my God!
Yeah, that was like an angel. That guy came in, and we sat down at this table, and there's a bunch of people playing hearts, and they said, "You want to join play us a game of play of hearts?" And so they dealt out those cards, and I swept them all. I got them all. And
I would say you would have the magic touch at that point. We do have a caller on Skype right now. We've got about 8 minutes before we're going to take a break. So let's turn to this caller. I think it's Wingman. Wingman, where are you from?
Hello, I'm from Kent in the UK. Thanks for taking my call.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello. I heard you talk about intuition, and synchronicity is a subject very close to my heart. But one thing that I kind of ventured into an area of synchronicity when I was quite young. And there's one area that I've not heard talked about with regards to synchronicity, and I'm in kind of no man's land that I'd like some assistance with, or some further understanding with, if you can help. And that is, I endeavoured to undertake an exploration of sound, and I use that sound as a kind of empathization with it. And then after a while, I start to notice a lot of synchronicities happen. And I just wanted to ask the question, have you guys heard of anything with regards to synchronicity speeding up until it becomes instantaneous? Because
Definitely.
this is what's been really, because I've never heard anyone talking about it. It's like a really it's really mysterious, but it's been happening to me more and more until and I've become enveloped in a kind of bubble of synchronicity. When my energy goes up, it becomes faster and faster. If you can explain a bit what you know about it, that'd be wonderful, because I've not really heard much on it.
That's a wonderful question.
And it goes back to what Rob was saying earlier. As you experience synchronicity and you become more and more aware of them happening, that's when they speed up. In fact, Carl Jung had a fascinating story, I think it was in his biography, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, about how he experienced, I think it was like a period of 12 hours, something having to do with a fish. It was an image, they had fish for dinner, somebody caught a fish, and at the time, working on one of his mythological treatises that involved Christianity, I believe it was. And he saw the fish, these repeated references to the fish, as confirmation that he should go forward with this particular
he was
project.
writing about something about fish as well. That was another aspect about it. That same day he had been writing about fish, and all these fish appeared in his life suddenly.
Yeah, but
from
in weird ways.
Yeah,
it wasn't. Yeah. So, I mean, if I were you, I would go and read, if you haven't read Jung's biography, definitely read it.
Okay. The other thing, the thing that seems to be inducing this process of feedback and like this loop of synchronicities, and you mentioned the word was intuition, which is quite interesting. It's like I say, I started to develop an understanding of intuition, and I use that in my kind of meditations, and that's when I start to notice things outside starting to synchronize, or things in my environment
That's fascinating.
Whether it be a tree creaking, a bird chirping, a car door slamming, and this process seems to be getting more and more refined as I understand intuition better and better. So what was your question?
Well, I was just wondering if, I mean, it sounds to me like what you're experiencing too is clusters of synchronicities. Like before, we were talking about, or did we talk about it? The
straight pins and the
the straight pins. I mean, a lot of people experience clusters of numbers, like Rob's Zen 666 and 665.
Yeah.
And there's another thing that happened a lot. Probably one of the most common things is that people be having a conversation, and they'll say a particular phrase, and on the television will be on, or the radio will be on, and that very same phrase somebody will say it on the television, and everybody stops and, did you hear that? It's just what I'd said. Or you mention a song and suddenly it comes on the radio. That's another one.
But it happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question for you. What if that process is actually can be an art form in itself, and that the timing can increase exponentially depending on the artist, if you want to call them that? I mean, have you considered that?
Yeah, I mean, here's a weird thing as a fiction writer. I remember a number of years ago, I had this great idea for writing a novel that involved Amelia Earhart's last flight. Well, not exactly an original idea, but my idea about what actually happened to her was unique, I thought. And suddenly, 2 books come out 6 months apart that are about the very thing. So I think that there's like a soup, a collective soup that anybody can tap into, but you have to do it intuitively. You have to put out your own feelers. You have to be aware. You have to, you just have to be aware.
It's like with inventions as well, simultaneous inventions, discoveries. Evolution. There was 2 people came up with the theory of evolution almost simultaneously.
Polio vaccine.
Yeah.
Penicillin.
Wingman, that is such a not only just a great question, but leading to even some more great thoughts. And I hate to cut this particular discussion short, but we're coming up on our break here in about 30 seconds. Do you want to get anything else in real quick, Wingman?
Yeah,
Before?
I mean, again, what I'm starting to tap into, my hunch is that synchronicity can be an art form, and I think this is what the ancients knew.
Yeah, I
But it's
think
a
so
case of
too.
how we develop that and how we tap into that. But I think it has a lot to do with intuition. I really do.
Yeah, I do too.
It sounds like you are in full swing of getting better and better at it too, Wingman. Good luck with that.
I'm in no man's land at the moment though, so it's quite scary.
Well, you're
Thank
not
you for taking
alone.
my call.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to break. I hate to do this. I wish we could just talk all the way through.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
If you missed the first hour of this show, you are definitely going to want to go to our archive at Inception Radio Network. It should be up there next Sunday night or sometime on Monday morning, and check out this interview with Rob and Trish MacGregor about synchronicity. We are having an absolute blast. And I have to tell a story about a comment that Trish made just before we took our break. First of all, let me give out the number. Dial in and talk to Rob and Trish yourself tonight at 888-919-2355. You can also Skype us at Inception Radio Network, and that's what Wingman just did, coming all the way from Great Britain just before the break. And you can also go into the chat room and type questions there for us, and we'll bring them up in the conversation. To make a long, it could be a long story, but I'm not going to turn it into one short. Trish had mentioned that she, several years ago, was going to write a book about what really happened to Amelia Earhart. And I have interviewed Mike Campbell on this show, who is the author of the book Truth at Last, about what actually did happen. It's a very deep, long research book based in part on Fred Gerner's work, which is another excellent book, and several other people who wrote wonderful, totally based on fact and evidence and testimony of what actually happened to Amelia Earhart. Mike and I have become friends in email. He maintains a blog with just spirited debate, and not a day goes by that I don't see something in my inbox from Amelia Earhart, Truth at Last blog. And here is Trish MacGregor on an interview telling someone that she was going to write a book and that 2 books came out. And I want to ask you, was one of them by Fred Gerner or was one by Mike Campbell? Do you remember?
I can't remember. This was about 20 years ago. And I just remember that I was struck by that, and I thought, okay, so these 2 people tapped into this collective soup before I did. That's what happened.
Isn't that amazing? That is just amazing. So synchronicity at work right here on your radio show, everybody. So, okay, one more time. The dial-in number is 888-919-2355. Gosh, we've been talking about all kinds of ways of having these little messages drop into your lap. And one of the, I guess the critical element is that you must remain open. You must keep what I would call a listening heart and be willing to pay attention and just sort of let things sit there in your skull and don't toss them aside because it couldn't really mean anything. What about dreams? Do we have synchronicity in our dreams?
Oh, I definitely think we do. And I think a lot of dreams, maybe more than we realize, are precognitive.
You know, one of the things that I just cannot bring myself to do is keep a journal or a diary, and I cannot wake myself up enough to write down dreams. I try my best to remember them when I wake up in the morning, but and I know that that's a poor excuse because you can learn so much from it, but
yeah, the tendency is that you have a dream that it might be so dramatic that I am not going to forget that. That is so unusual. And then 5 minutes later, after you got up, what was that dream about again?
Yeah.
But then, if you, even in the middle, if you have a piece of paper by the bedside and a pen, if you jot down a few words, even though you're half asleep and it's hard to read in the morning, at least you have a hint of there was something important or some dream, and then you look at that piece of paper, even though there isn't much there, it's usually enough to trigger the memory of what that dream was.
I also think there's a lot of spirit contact in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Here is a personal example. My mother died in 2000 from complications from Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
In 2005, my dad died from complications of Parkinson's.
Mm.
So through dreams over the years since then, it's like they've been, like in one dream, my mother was still, in one of the early dreams, she was still really confused. She was wandering around in a dark room looking for my father. I thought, okay, so she's not quite healed yet or something.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the next dream, which was a few months later, I saw her and she was directing a line of people into a theater. And I thought, wow, okay, she's with it again. And she looked younger and she was vivacious. And the same thing has happened with my dad, too. At first, in dreams, he would still be in a wheelchair. He would still be ailing. And then slowly, the dreams got so that he was getting younger and, he was healing. So one night, I went to Rob's meditation class that he teaches. And it was a meditation where he makes you keep your eyes half open or a little bit open.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in this really deep meditative state. And in a corner of the room, I saw my parents. I mean, I actually saw them. This is not a hallucination. My mother looked fantastic. She was waving. And at that point, my father came into my line of vision. And as soon as they realized I had seen them, they disappeared.
Huh.
So, I mean, for me, that was like confirmation that they're doing good.
They're just touching base.
Yeah, they're touching base, saying, we're cool.
And I've heard several stories from my students who have taken my meditation course that have come up to me and said they have made contact with family members who have passed on through the meditation. And one woman said she was very intuitive, but her brother died 1.5 years ago, and she hadn't gotten any message, anything from him until that night through the meditation course. So things can happen in dreams, and things can happen like that through meditation, where you're you're still awake, but you're in an altered state, basically.
Mm-hmm. And one of the questions I had planned to ask you is, how would you recommend a person improve his or her ability to receive these messages and stay open to that? What would you recommend?
Just give yourself a suggestion. When you get up in the morning, say, okay, I'm open. Bring it on.
Yeah,
That's what I do.
Yeah, and the first thing is you have to really think about the whole process and what you're doing and what your beliefs are. If you really question whether it's possible to make contact with the deceased, a family member, or whatever, if you don't think it's really possible, that belief is probably what you're going to experience. But if you can really think about it enough, read about it enough, and get to the point where you can accept that possibility, open your mind enough, then the chances of making contact are much stronger. And as Trish said, giving that suggestion, like before going to sleep, that you'll make contact.
And as you wake up in the morning.
Right. Or you can even do it, right, for during the day, that there might be something that appears in your life related to that person. I mean, we've had some strange stories about clocks that what clock that stopped at the
moment of death.
At the moment of death, and then I can't remember the full story now. It started again at a birthday or something like that, and
I can't remember. It was a grandfather clock.
Yeah, and
Right.
a very strange story. Yeah, and that it hadn't even been plugged in or something. I can't remember the whole story now. So
This is the one in your book?
It's in one of the books.
I remember you telling a story about a man giving his, it was either a man gave his wife a very expensive, wonderful clock, and it was just before he died or just before she died or something.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if it was a battery operated. I don't think it was an electric, but it just would never work. And it was a brand new clock, and it literally stopped on the exact time that whichever one of them died.
Right.
Yeah, it was the father.
It was a father?
Yeah, it was the father and who had given the clock to the wife.
Right.
That's what it was.
Right. And, I would add to what you were saying, Rob. I'm inviting myself into this as if I have a right to an opinion. But I would add to what you said that I think it's really important that when you're trying to be open, you should also try to stay unstructured and don't require that the messages that you're going to listen for come to you either in any particular way.
Right.
And not along any particular lines. I know that there's many people when they lose a parent or sibling or friend or whatever, they see that person in a certain way, and they might want to get some business resolved with them. But that might very well not be the message that you're going to get if you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that's definitely true.
Yeah, you have to be open to things appearing in different manners than you might expect. It's my mother, after my father's death, got a message from him in a very unusual way. She lives in Minneapolis. It was winter, and there was a chair that he always sat in. And there was a window right next to the chair, and the window is all frosted, and his nickname was Mac, and those letters were in the frost one morning.
That was one thing we didn't bring up, and that would really throw me if I looked over at a window. And you had another instance in the book. Not only do you see writing, like initials or whatever in the window, and somebody saw the paw of their animal.
Right. Also, we also had a story, our friend Mike Perry in the UK, who had lost his daughter. The day that he and his wife returned from her funeral, the wife went into the kitchen to make some tea, and the teapot left steam on the window, and her face appeared in the steam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So these messages are really all around us, and it's really a question of whether you're open and you're paying attention as to whether you'll notice it. And then if you do notice it, will you take it as a message? It's like a telegram that you either receive or you don't receive.
Right.
Wow.
And, it's so easy to miss them.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they're quick and it's like, oh, you blink and it's gone.
Right. There were a couple of things that you talked about in the book that I had not heard these terms before, and I thought they were very interesting. One of them I'll mention real quickly. Earlier, Rob, you were talking about the guy who took you to the coffee shop, and later you found out that had he not stopped by and picked you up, you would have been squashed and turned into so much dog food.
Yeah.
In your book, you mentioned the third man syndrome. Is that an example of that?
That's interesting.
The third man syndrome usually is more of a ghostly figure. This happens. Happened with Charles Lindbergh. He was flying in difficult conditions across the Atlantic, and he'd been flying for 22 hours, and he was having some difficulties, and because of the weather, and he was barely above the ocean. I mean, the spray from the breaking waves were striking the airplane. That's how low he was, and he suddenly was aware forms. He called them forms of beings that were in the plane with him, helping him, guiding him through the rest of that flight. And he wrote about this in his autobiography. That was like the third man phenomena, and this and also adventurers, mountain climbers who have gotten lost or who've come across bad weather conditions or walking along, and every one of them will swear there was an extra person with them, and that was somehow helpful. And yet, when they regroup, there was the so-called third man is not there.
Wow. It almost sounds, and I'm not trying to stretch it to fit something else, but some of these instances where you hear about there's a terrible car wreck and someone who thought they were going to die and they said, oh, so-and-so told me to do this, and they held my hand, and then I made it to the hospital, and people are saying there wasn't anybody there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
I think that's also a third man thing.
Yeah.
Okay, now talk about death delayed. What is that about?
Death delayed.
Let's see. Death delayed.
You mentioned this was a really interesting story. You had a couple, and the woman had been trying to get pregnant, and the guy had been at a bar on the other side of town and had too much to drink and was driving.
Right. This happened to Connie, Rob.
Right.
Oh.
Do you remember the story?
Yeah. Let's see here. I'm trying to.
I almost know it by heart because it was astounding. He actually had a wreck and totaled the car and should have died, but he didn't.
Right, and then then it happened again, and he did. Right,
yes, but in between, she was not able to have a baby and get pregnant, and I'll be darned, she got pregnant, and then after she had gotten pregnant and had the baby, he did the very same thing again, and then he died. Same thing, same tree, everything.
Yeah,
I remember this.
That was a really.
I remember
story.
that. Yeah, I mean, you have to excuse us after all these stories we've collected for 4 books. It's really hard to remember some of these.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. It's so fresh in my brain.
Yeah. There's another area of the trickster is a very interesting phenomenon. Death and the trickster. The trickster phenomena, it's mythical characters, archetype. Enjoys playing with our perceptions, and with these synchronicities related to death, there's heavy irony with them. And for example, Will Rogers, the actor, writer, humorist, he died in a plane crash with his aviator buddy Willie Post, and shortly after they had taken off from a lagoon in Barrow Point, Alaska. And so Rogers' typewriter was found in the debris, and the last word he typed was death. So,
now, how about this one? Trappist monk Thomas Merton, he proclaimed to this important meeting of religious leaders that the times ahead were electrifying. And that very day, he died by electrocution while sitting in the bathtub.
Oh, my gosh.
That's
that's the trickster.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I'd love to know what Tesla said at the very end.
Yeah, so would I.
And Jim Fixx, he was very well known as a runner. He wrote the book in the late 70s called The Complete Book of Running.
Right.
And he triggered the jogging craze, actually, and he died of a heart attack while running. The irony was that he died of doing what he enjoyed, and that's a good way to go. But it was what he was writing about, what he wrote about, and what he made famous is the way he went. And there's another one. The guy named James Heselden, not a well-known name, but he bought the Segway company. Those little vehicles that are like scooters that people can move around in. And he accidentally drove his over a 30-foot cliff and died on his property. Went into a river.
So sometimes you kind of wonder, did the soul plan this to make some sort of statement? You know what I mean?
Or the soul had a
Yeah.
terrific sense of humor or
Yeah,
something.
right.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Really.
Well, you're making me want to ask you about your blog. Now, you mentioned that you've been collecting all of these comments on your blog for so many years. Can people actually go to your website is Synchro Secrets, right?
Well, the
Synchro
website is
Secrets,
synchrosecrets.com, and then if you put a / and write Synchro Secrets, it'll take you to the blog.
Okay, so synchrosecrets.com/synchrosecrets, and that
Right.
is the blog.
That's
Right.
the blog.
So we
And-
could go there tonight and go right to
Sure.
that address, and we fall right into the blog that you're talking about where all these wonderful stories came from.
Right, and
Right,
there is
yeah.
a search bar.
You can, yeah,
So you
on
can
the right
put in
side.
like Trickster, and the Trickster synchros will come up.
Okay, I'm going to put this in the chat room so everybody has it. They don't have to worry about spelling synchrosecrets.com/synchrosecrets. And that's a
Right.
cluster in itself.
Yes,
Right?
isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of synchro
That's
secrets.
true. I want to make sure I've got that spell right. Yep. That's going to be very helpful. I'm definitely going to bookmark that because I want to go there and look some of this stuff up.
I mean, we've gotten so there have been people. We've gotten such great response to this blog from people who have commented over the years. Just people from different cultures and countries and different experiences. It's been great.
Mm-hmm. You sound like your voice is getting tired there, Trish. We're going to take a break in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Let me give out the number again for everybody. It's 888-919-2355. We're talking with Rob and Trish MacGregor about one of their 4 books where they cover synchronicity. This one is called Synchronicity and the Other Side. And you can also go to our chat room and put a question in there or Skype us at Inception Radio Network. You talked about in one chapter, it's so funny, this is a synchronicity probably for me. Here I am in Western New York, and probably 40 miles from me, just to the west, is Lilydale, New York.
Oh,
And
yes.
you talked about Cassadaga, Florida, and what's so funny to me about that is there's another town here between me and Lilydale named Cassadaga, New York.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Yeah,
So-
and Lilydale is the sister community, spiritualist community of Cassadaga, Florida.
I'm sure it is. It sounds like it's almost the same, except with the Florida weather, they pretty much
Right.
stay open all year.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
And at Lilydale, they have their heyday starting in late June, I think. It's not
Right.
even Memorial Day. It's somewhere in late June, maybe around the 4th of July, and they go through till about Labor Day, and that's it.
Yeah.
But they're still open. You can still drive over there any time of the year and look up someone who lives on the premises and get a reading. The gift shop's open, the library's open.
Oh, that's good.
But all the activities and all of the special speakers, that only goes on in the summertime. But yours is open year-round, right?
Right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
So talk a little bit about spiritualism and the history of that, because that's something that's very interesting. I know that a lot of our listeners are very interested in the Fox sisters and how that started. And I honestly didn't know until I read in your book that there was a community in Florida.
Well, Cassadaga is kind of a unique. It truly is a unique place. I mean, it doesn't look like anything else in Florida. It's got hills. The houses look like they belong on Cape Cod, or maybe out of a fairy tale. It's just a really odd little place. And you walk around, I mean, on one side is the spiritualist camp, which the spiritualist camp lies behind the Cassadaga Hotel. Then across the street is not the camp, but you can still find mediums and psychics who just don't belong to the Spiritualist Association. But, it's the only town I've ever been to where you can just walk around, walk up to a door and knock and say, "Can I have a reading?"
It sounds a
there's-
lot
I
like
mean,
Lilydale.
And there are little signs out at the by the gate usually that a Reverend so and so, and they have a sign in the window that whether they're open or not for readings, and it's and a lot of them who live in the spiritualist community itself are fairly old and aging. They don't take a lot of new people in. There's only a certain number of houses there, and they're quite strict. They don't take anybody who does card readings or the tarot cards. They have to, and they don't want just psychics. They have to be mediums, and they test them, and so they follow this spiritualist way that goes back to the late 19th century. And so this community was developed by
George Colby.
George Colby. He was guided by a spirit guide named Seneca to found this community. And he was told that he would find the place would be somewhere in Central Florida where there were 9 unusual hills. And,
no, 7.
Seven unusual hills, and the reason they were unusual because there are no hills in Florida. So the 7 hills in this community were unusual, and that's where he settled, and he eventually developed the spiritualist community there. And the others, people would come in the winter from Lilydale down to Casadega, and then finally it was developed as a full-time residence.
Oh my goodness!
But what's so interesting, I mean, you can get readings that are just as good on the other side of the road.
Oh yeah, Trish, hold on to that thought because Joe's giving me the high sign over here, and we're going to have to take a break. But we're going to go right back to that because that was very interesting what you said. If you didn't make it in the association, you can still go across the street and get the other side of the story. So let's take a quick break here, just a couple of minutes. Everybody stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. If you're just now logging in or you've missed some of it, you definitely are going to want to go to our archive at Inception Radio Network. This entire interview will be posted there come Sunday night or Monday next week. You go to shows, archive, Epic Voyages Radio, and we'll be there. Please check in and listen to it. This is a great show tonight. We're talking to Rob and Trish MacGregor, who are prolific authors. We've been talking for the last 90 minutes about synchronicity, intuitive willingness to listen to messages coming from the other side. And you can call us and ask a question directly to Rob and Trish at 888-919-2355. You can also Skype us at Inception Radio Network and ask them a question through Skype, or you can go to our chat room and ask a question there, and we'll read it in. I wanted to ask you, talk a little bit about visitation dreams and how can you get a visitation dream?
Well, I think the first step is to request it. You have to have a real deep desire for that. Yeah, and then once you have the desire.
Yeah, it's called incubating a dream. You might write something in a journal about what you're thinking about, what you'd like to have a dream about, and then repeat it over. Come up with a statement that's short and simple that relates to your request, and work at it. And don't give up if it doesn't happen the first time. If you keep at it, you're going to have that dream.
Okay, let's back up one step and give us an example for people who haven't read your book yet. By the way, you can go to Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or probably any bookstore that you're familiar with and look for this title, Synchronicity and the Other Side, but they have 2 other books with synchronicity prominently in the title and a 4th one that deals with not only synchronicity but alien abductions. And we're going to talk to Rob and Trish in a few months about that book. But give an example of what would just give an example of a visitation dream.
Take it away, Rob.
Well, it's like you're sending the message out saying, I would really like to hear from you, or I would like to know about this or something, right? You're initiating
I
the
think
call.
part of it's intention.
Yeah, but sometimes these don't. I'm thinking of one visitation dream I had related to a cousin of mine. I knew he was ill, very sick, but I wasn't. I didn't. He was in Minnesota. I'm in Florida, and we weren't that close. But I heard from my sister that he was very ill. So I thought about him once in a while, but I didn't know much about his situation. And then suddenly I had a very clear dream of him, and he looks very healthy. And he's looking around, and he says, "What's going on anyhow?" And my sister called me in the morning and said he had died the night before.
Oh, my goodness.
And also...
And that was the same day I had to write a proposal for this book.
Oh,
Remember
goodness.
that?
No, that was John. That was another John. That was my second cousin.
okay.
John. Yeah, this is a different cousin who also died, and the one that Trish is talking about. He died, and I didn't hear about his death until a couple days later. Two cousins both named John, and. We looked up the date that we had sent the inquiry to our agent about writing this book, Synchronicity on the Other Side, and it was the same day that he died, which was interesting. But I'd like to tell one story also about that relates back to Casa Tague, the spiritualist community, and this cousin of mine. There is a woman that we had gone to for years to have readings.
Who was part of the community.
Who's part of the community. Remember, her name is slipping my mind. Hazel.
Burley.
Hazel Burley. And I had a reading with her, and she's very mediumistic, and she says, I'm picking up the letter J, and I'm getting brain cancer, or something with a brain. I think it's brain cancer. But then she paused and said, wait a minute, I don't understand this. I'm getting two of them, J, brain cancer. And I said, are you kidding me? Within that past year, I had two friends, one of them name was Jay, J-A-Y, and then my cousin John, both had died of brain cancer, and she was picking up on both of them.
Oh, my goodness.
And for her to say that, I mean, it sounds stupid to say that, well, I'm getting two J's and two brain cancers, but she was right.
Wow.
So that was pretty startling, and it just is so meaningful to me, and just and so. It's all anecdotal evidence, but when it's personal like that, you understand it to be real. I mean,
it grabs your attention.
Yeah, it does, and so it can't be proven psychically. Scientists say there's no such thing as life after death because we can't prove it. But when you have personal experiences, anecdotal experiences, you understand that there's something more.
Let's go back to that topic about Casa Tague that we were talking about just before the break. You were saying that if you go across the street, those guys are not in the association, the formal association, and they're entitled to have property and live in Casa Tague. But that doesn't mean that they are not intuitive and skilled and have the ability to give you information. Trish, what were you going to say about that?
I was going to say there's a woman that we have gone to a number of times who lives on the other side of the road, who's not a certified medium.
The other side of the tracks.
The other side of the tracks.
Yeah.
But she is the most incredibly skilled psychometrist. You can hand her anything, a piece of jewelry. My daughter's handed her cell phone, and she can read it. And when we were writing Aliens in the Backyard, which also involves synchronicity, one of the abductees, or a guy who had an encounter, had been carrying around a vial of holy water with him for a year. So we said, well, as protection. So we said, okay, well, send us the vial of holy water and we'll take it to the psychometrist and see what she picks up about your experience. Well, because this woman is an RN who works in an emergency room on weekends, she thought the vial was filled with urine.
Let me just explain the story a bit.
Yeah, so, Rob, you pick it up.
Yeah, so we had Charles Fontaine was the name of the man. He lives in Quebec, and he's somewhat religious, and he had this incredible experience in his backyard, this alien encounter, where that's in the other book, and but he was very frightened of this experience, and he had all kinds of synchronicities related to it, and one of the synchronicities was he went to a bookstore. And he never went to bookstores, but he just had an urge in Montreal to go into a bookstore, and he only picked up one book, and it was a book about synchronicity in French, and it was The Seven Secrets of Synchronicity, which is the title of the first book that Trish and I wrote about synchronicity. So he takes it home, he starts reading it, and then he pauses and goes to his computer and Googles the term synchronicity and UFOs, and this image comes up on the screen that's very similar to what he saw, which was several beams coming from the sky and some black object above that he couldn't really see, but these beams of light coming down to the earth, and there was some kind of energy inside these swirling around inside these beams of light, and that it was being pulled up from the earth. And anyhow, so he looked closely at what where this was coming from, and it was a blog, and it was our blog. And so he's reading our book, and he just puts in that term UFOs and synchronicity, and our blog comes up, and with a picture very similar. And he said, then he knew he had to contact us, and that's how that book began. We had been thinking about writing a book about UFOs for years, but we never really had a hook until we realized there's this connection between UFO encounters and synchronicity. But now we're getting off on another tangent.
No. You're talking about the other book, Aliens in the Backyard, right?
Right, yes.
Yeah, that's definitely. And for those of you who weren't here at the beginning of the show, I really originally wanted to talk to them about that book and this book because of that overlap. But as you can see, there's so much meat in this one book. We are just not going to get to it tonight. And we've got about 13.
Well, anyway, what Kathy...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what Kathy picked up when she read this vial of holy water, she said, something really unusual happened to this man, and he's scared. He's really frightened about what happened to him. And his wife just wants to forget that anything happened. Mm-hmm. So and she talked a little bit more...
Yeah, she said this is not a spiritual experience. This is something very strange. This is what she said about it, and she was right about that.
And so then, when I finally told her what happened, I said, "So why did he have this encounter? What was their purpose?" And she ran her fingers over the vial of holy water, and she goes, "It was entertainment."
For them, not for him.
For them, not for him.
Yeah. That's it.
So you got these, ETs cruising around in their ships, abducting people for entertainment.
That is the crazy idea that's what would be considered entertainment, but that's what she came up with, and it definitely was not entertaining for him because it changed his life. I mean, he had no belief in UFOs. He thought it was something that Hollywood created in television and movies, and that if there was really alien crafts that existed, the U.S. military would have told us about it a long time ago, and that seems to be I thought that was a very naive statement that he made.
Yeah, I think that's naive, born bordering on gullible, actually.
Yeah.
And talking about that book, Aliens in the Backyard, for a second, you guys did an excellent job of collecting all the details from these several different people who had these abduction experiences, including a mother with her young son. And
Yeah.
On a military base.
yeah, well, that's where they wound up. They're minding their own business, driving down the highway behind all their belongings in a moving van, and all of a sudden they're on a military base, and there's aliens there and people threatening them. I mean, how does that happen?
And the woman who told us that story too doesn't care anymore if her real name is used. So that was another real big plus for her whole venue.
Yeah,
we didn't have to use a pseudonym. So many people are afraid of having their real names used. They don't want to lose their jobs or their spouses or their.
Yeah, the one we call the man from Montreal, rural Montreal, we call him Charles Fontaine, but he works in the aeronautical field in Montreal, and his problem was he could not talk to anybody about this because he didn't want to be seen as a crazy in his workplace or in his community. So that was his big problem, that this incredible thing happened. His whole view of reality had changed, and he couldn't talk about it to anybody but his wife, who didn't want to talk about it. And so he found us.
I'm putting your website back in the chat room again. Some people they got here so late that they hadn't seen it. So you're definitely going to come back sometime the next couple of months and talk about that. Just before our show tonight, and those of you who haven't heard yet, maybe that Jerry Pippin passed away earlier today in Oklahoma. They were replaying a show of his, and they were talking about abductees. Those people suffer a lot. And I think that really comes through in your book. It's not a fun and games thing. It's a very terrifying. No. It's almost like a rape, and in some cases, it is a rape.
Yeah, that's there's.
I mean, Whitley Strieber is probably. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, there's two sides to it. There's people who call themselves experiencers who believe that these are positive experiences and they're here to help us. And there's the other people like Charles Fontaine who said, "How could they be here to help us when I'm terrified and worried that they're going to come back any day now, and this is not a good experience." So, and experiencers will say, "Well, he's looking at the cup half full rather than half empty, or he's looking at half empty rather than half full." And so it's a controversial thing, but our perspective is that both are true. I mean, there's probably it's not one invasion of one type of being, but there probably are multiple groups here, and they're probably having conflict of their own, and some are protecting us, some don't care one way or the other, and some are out to destroy us possibly in their own way. But probably not in the way that we would destroy ourselves with bombs and that. I think they're beyond that, but they have other ways of doing it.
Yeah, true. And I'm sure that we provide quite a spectacle to them as they're observing.
Yeah. Entertainment.
Well, yeah, if you want to call it, kind of like a train wreck. We've got a question from the chat room. What is your take on inexplicable connections between people who cannot possibly have met yet, but they recognize, I guess this means even as specific as recognizing their names? I guess that's kind of under a deja vu kind of thing. Is that synchronicity?
I'm not quite sure I understand. Is it like soulmates they're thinking about?
Well, no, people, you meet a stranger. Maybe you've been to a coffee shop and you meet a stranger, and it's like I don't know, the names are a synchronicity, or you have a feeling of connection or something.
Yeah, yeah.
That happens
sometimes
a lot.
Yeah, you meet someone and you just know there's a connection with that person. And what I think, I'm not sure if it's synchronicity, but it might be something related to past lives, that you have known this person in a past life, which is a whole other subject, of course.
Yeah, Carol in the chat room asked that, and she says, yes, that's what I mean. Is it like soulmates? So
Yeah.
Yes,
well, and it
and
doesn't
also-
even have to be as close as a soulmate, but definitely it's a prior familiarity of some sort.
Yeah,
Yes.
that there's some kind of
Definitely.
connection at the spirit level or another life.
Trish, were you going to say something else?
Well, I just thought sometimes, like in 1998, I think it was, I walked into a Borders, and I was in the New Age section looking for something interesting to read. And a book literally fell at my feet. Now, one of the terms for this is library angel. That's one of the terms I've heard.
I've
heard other terms too, but and it was Carol Bowman's book, Children's Past Lives. And I grabbed it and I ran home and I read it. I thought, wow, this book is amazing. So I got in touch with her. Anyway, we became friends, and I referred her to my agent. He sold her second book. You know, there are just certain connections that really are inexplicable. You know, but intended in some way to happen.
And including it, you were intended to be at a certain place at a certain time.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just the fact of Trish and I meting each other and having such similar interests too. I mean, when people meet us, they usually, after meeting us for a bit, they're very surprised. They say they've never met a couple who have so much in common with the same weirdness, I guess.
I love that. Well, guys, we've got like 4
Poor
minutes.
daughter has to explain this stuff to her friends. You know, it's like, oh well, I have these really weird parents.
Oh, that's a good
Okay,
question.
what's
What
she
does
say?
your daughter think about all of this?
Go ahead, Trish.
Abraham Hicks stuff, and she's very intuitive. She's very intuitive.
Yeah, she's spiritually
She's fascinated
oriented.
by all of it.
And when she was young, she would say, "Don't talk to me about aliens. That scares me," you know. And she's still not too into.
But then she would come in and watch X-Files with us.
Yeah, she would always watch X-Files and immediately fall asleep, but she was always looking forward to it when she was young. She is spiritually oriented, and she's very much into Esther Hicks and the whole phenomena.
Abraham.
Yeah.
And this from an individual who was willing to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
Yeah, right. Several times. Several times.
How funny. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that if you guys have anything coming up that we would love to know about, that you have a chance to tell us. Are you going to be at any conferences, or are you making any presentations?
Well, actually, we're going to be
we're going to a Tallahassee Writers Conference.
Oh, wonderful. When's that?
That's in the third week of April 20.
That's coming right up.
Yeah.
Third weekend.
Yeah, third weekend of April. And we're not, I'm going to be giving a talk about creativity and dreams and different ways of accessing your creativity and helping you develop your writing skills through intuitive means, and I'll also be talking about Indiana Jones, which I've written 7 Indiana Jones novels for Lucasfilm and Bantam Books, and so that's another topic.
And this is my fault, listeners, because I cut Rob's and Trish's introduction short at the beginning of this interview. And I could, like I said, if I had gone through all of their credentials, we would have just now been getting to the topic of synchronicity. But Rob does have this incredible background working with the Indiana Jones stories and several books that were like a prequel, right, to the movies?
I wrote The Last Crusade, they gave me the script, and I expanded on the 110-page script into a 350-page novel. And then after that was on the New York Times bestseller list, they asked me if I would like to create Indiana Jones' younger years, after he got out of college, when he just started as an archaeologist in the 1920s. So I covered Indiana Jones in 6 novels in the 1920s.
Wow. Wow. And I am sorry for cutting that short.
That's
and
okay.
I will make it up to both of you, I promise, in our next interview.
You did mention George Lucas, so.
Yeah, I did in the intro.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe is giving me the high sign over here. So we will look for you in Tallahassee towards the second half of April. And where is this dream workshop going to be, or this presentation? Is that going to be at the okay.
Google Tallahassee Writers Conference, and you'll find all the
April
details.
23rd, 24th.
Okay. Joe is getting ready to bring the railroad barricade down on my neck here, so I'm going to have to sign off for tonight.
Okay.
Everybody
we really enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Everybody be sure and come back next week and listen to Alan Smith talking with Ray Hernandez about the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. Rob and Trish, thank you so very much. Thank you, Joe, for all the hard technical help.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both.
And I am going to be in touch with you about another interview very soon.
Okay,
so
very good.
Everybody have a wonderful
great.
and a safe week, and let's hope spring comes.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyagers. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.
You say too much to learn. You say cover up the spine. That's your plan, not mine. I'm ready to be told. Time for secrets to